Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we will continue to study the Mahayana Shurangama Sutra. In the Mahayana Shurangama Sutra, during the recent dialogue between the Buddha and Ananda, the Buddha, in order to allow Ananda and the rest of the retinue to understand the essence of the 6 faculties, used an analogy. He used a method of demonstration to let everyone understand. What was his demonstration? It was what we mentioned earlier, involving a piece of silk, or a kata, or a scarf. This scarf was used to tie 6 knots. And regarding these 6 knots, the question was asked, is the first knot the 6th knot, or is the 6th knot the first knot? Then, on this point, at that time Ananda and the retinue thought that, although the scarf with the knots tied in it is a woven piece of cloth, such a single material, because different knots were tied, certainly, the first knot, the second knot, or the 6th knot, their essence, from the perspective of the knots, is not one entity. However, from the perspective of this scarf, its own essence is one entity. They were analyzing such an analogy. Actually, sometimes in our tantric teachings as well, for example, a crystal ball is used for demonstration, or we are given nectar to taste, or we are shown images of certain dakinis, or we are allowed to listen to certain sounds, or we touch soft and rough objects. All these things are ways to recognize the nature of our mind. They are ways to point out the nature of the mind. For those of sharp faculties relying on such methods, they will recognize it immediately. For those of dull faculties, through such analogies, they can slowly, gradually contemplate the principles within, and then, whether towards their own mind or external phenomena, they can gain a further understanding. It has the function of helping them understand or realize the truth. Today we continue to explain. The Buddha said to Ananda, suppose you were displeased by the 6 knots, and would prefer it to be a single length of cloth. How would you go about it? The Buddha told Venerable Ananda at that time, you must be displeased by these 6 knots. Regarding these 6 knots, you probably wish that these 6 knots were not formed, that they didn't become 6 knots. You would still prefer and be willing for it to become a single piece. Isn't that right? Do you feel this way? Because with 6 knots, Ananda also seemed unable to answer at this moment. Saying they are one entity wouldn't work. Saying they are different entities also wouldn't work. Because, after all, within this essence one could say it is a single entity, but in terms of manifestation, they are different entities. It is equivalent to our 6 sense faculties. The essence of the 6 faculties is also one entity, but in terms of their manifestations, whether it's their respective functions or appearances, as well as their characteristics, they are all different entities. So he might have been a little confused. Why is it like this? Ananda replied to the Buddha in this way. Ananda said, as long as these knots are in the scarf, there will naturally be disagreement about which one of them is which. Ananda also answered, saying, yes, Tathagata, it is indeed so. As long as these knots exist, disagreements will actually arise in abundance, meaning that as long as there are knots, no matter how you explain it, it won't be clear. Saying they are one entity doesn't work, and saying they are different entities doesn't work either. These disagreements will certainly continue to arise. During this process, what else will arise? What will arise naturally? This knot is not that knot, and that knot is not this knot. Everyone should know this, because if you have 6 knots, the first knot, this knot, is definitely not that knot, the 6th knot, and the 6th knot is certainly not this first knot.
when observing them mutually in this way. Actually, as long as there are different knots on this scarf, then arguments over this is and that is can never be quelled. This problem cannot be solved. Naturally, many problems will emerge. So perhaps Ananda also felt that, well, if there is only one scarf, this wouldn't happen. But once these knots are here, now I can't answer, and not answering is also not okay. The Buddha keeps pressing the question. In this situation I am also quite in a dilemma. So in principle, I would still prefer for these knots to all be untied, to have no knots. If there were no knots, then everything would be fine and perfectly well. He thought this way at the time. Then Ananda further said, but if the thus come one were now to untie them all, and no further knots were tied, then there would be no question as to which was which, since there would be no first knot left, much less a sixth. Ananda continued to tell the thus come one, perhaps because Ananda and the thus come one were relatives. Ananda was actually quite bold, saying many things in front of the thus come one. Many other disciples might not have been like this, because of the thus come one's majesty, the thus come one's dignity, and considering that the thus come one is such remarkable, many might not necessarily speak in such detail, like our mutual conversations and chats in the world. They might not dare to say it, but Ananda said, if the thus come one today unties this total knot entirely, that would be the best, because if these knots are not there, if the 6 knots on the scarf we just talked about were not formed at all, then the problem would be solved from the root. There wouldn't be this kind of relationship of this and that at all. This knot, that knot, the first knot, the second knot, the third knot, the fourth knot, the fifth knot, all the way to the 6th knot. The concept of such knots wouldn't exist either. None of these would exist, not even one, if there were no knots at all. If the overall knot wasn't there, then the first knot couldn't exist. If the first knot wasn't there, then by analogy the 6th knot couldn't exist either, because the 6th knot must be based on the foundation of the first knot and the second knot before it can be formed. In that case, what Ananda actually meant was that regarding these knots, if there were a way for the overall knot to be completely gone, or for these knots to all be gone one by one, this would probably be the best. Actually, such an analogy indirectly refers to our sense faculties. As for our faculties, it is best if the root is gone. If the overall root is gone, then the first faculty is also gone. If the first faculty is gone, how could there be 6 faculties? Having the 6 faculties, we continually drown in the 6 realms, so this is a very troublesome matter. He very much wanted to make all 6 faculties vanish and attain liberation. This was Ananda's thought. Actually, within the 6 realms of samsara, even now, each of us relies on the 6 faculties, and this is the problem that exists for everyone, and also the problem to be solved. However, sometimes we feel that having the 6 faculties is very good. Why? Because we have the 6 faculties, we can now enjoy the Mahayana Dharma. If our eyes couldn't see, our ears couldn't hear, and basically in this world, having this kind of existence, including the tongue faculty, the body faculty, and so on, if we lacked these other faculties as well, indeed in this lifetime we wouldn't necessarily have this opportunity to enjoy the Mahayana Dharma. Every one of us here, although some people might appear a little clumsy, I notice during study examinations, some people are especially active. As for others, it seems they just keep watching others, looking over here with their mouths open. I don't know if they are clumsy or if it's great wisdom appearing as stupidity. They just keep quiet. I often see this, but it's still fine. If sometimes there are 2 people together, everyone has to speak, so there is this opportunity. There is still such an opportunity during study examinations. Perhaps our memories are different. Perhaps our spiritual capacities are also somewhat different. But regardless, generally speaking, for everyone, being able to receive the nectar of the Mahayana Dharma like this is for our entire lives truly very important. Around us, there are also many people who are blind, deaf, mute, or physically disabled, or even unable to move around wherever they go. There are so many kinds of people like this, so sometimes we see that having these faculties is still very important, but we need to solve this major problem, which is liberating the 6 faculties. At this time the Buddha told Ananda, the Buddha said, when the 6 are untied, the one will vanish, is the same idea. Actually, regarding our faculties, there are also 6 faculties to resolve. When resolving the 6 faculties, just as mentioned earlier, if a faculty does not arise, then one single faculty cannot possibly arise either. If one faculty doesn't arise, the 6 faculties cannot possibly arise either. If the 6 faculties are already liberated, then not even one remaining faculty can exist. It is liberated at the same time. So regarding this, when the 6 are untied, the one will vanish. We also talked about this major problem earlier. The principle is also the same. If there is a way, generally speaking, for our faculties to self-liberate, then all the others are also universally liberated. According to the Great Perfection teachings, if one of our faculties self-liberates, the other 5 faculties are also completely liberated. This is also very important, since time without beginning, due to your deranged confusion about the nature of your mind, your awareness has become distorted, and these distortions have not ceased. The strain on the awareness generates perceived objects, it says next. But for us sentient beings, including Ananda and many other sentient beings, liberation is not actually that easy. Why do I say this? Because although our luminous and perfect awareness is pure, flawless, and luminous, for many sentient beings headed by you, since beginningless time, it has always been that the nature of our mind has been confused, and ignorance has appeared, then various kinds of derangements manifested, just like Yajnadatta getting sick, as we discussed the other day. Many of his earlier delusional manifestations, there was no way to stop them. If you look for a cause, it's not easy to find one. By the same reasoning, for us sentient beings, since beginningless time, our minds have been deranged. After the mind became deranged, awareness became distorted. What was produced? These confused false manifestations of his arose naturally. Then, once these false manifestations appeared, then these distortions did not cease. These false manifestations kept appearing continuously and couldn't be stopped. Finally, the strain on the awareness generates perceived objects. Finally, gradually, one comes to perceive the various forms, sounds, smells, tastes, and so on, of external objects, the appearances of the 6 sensory objects of the physical world and the sentient world. Regarding this section, there are many different commentaries from the Han region. They correlate it with, there are 6 kinds of knots, for example the knot of cessation, the knot of stillness, the knot of movement, etc. There are various different knots. There are also the 5 aggregates, and they correspond to these coarse and subtle phenomena. In their respective commentaries, they make some charts and explain it like this. Of course, explaining it this way, it should also be, it's probably one way to explain it. But without that, the actual meaning is that if we want to untie these 6 faculties, these habitual tendencies from beginningless time are deeply ingrained, and it's not that easy to clear them away immediately. As long as we are people drowning in samsara, indeed everyone should be very clear about this. For us right now, a mountain is a mountain, a river is a river, any kind of solid thing like this, in front of us, temporarily speaking. It's not just a matter of saying in principle that they don't exist and then they're gone. Here he uses an analogy. It is as in the example of your eyes staring until they become so stressed that they see flowers in the sky. Amidst the clarity of enlightened understanding, deranged confusion arises for no good reason. Just as in our worldly life, if our eyes keep staring into empty space, eventually the eyes get tired. After they get tired, naturally some hairs or floaters appear, or various confusing phenomena in the sky like flowers, all sorts of things. Actually, this shouldn't exist in the true, pure, flawless, luminous essence of seeing. However, relying on such causes and conditions, relying on some temporary causes and conditions, or you could say without a cause, without a real cause, in causelessness, in front of you, undeniably, unstoppably, a chaotic manifestation will appear. This is also something many of us, people with eye diseases or when our eyes get tired, will experience. It is exactly identical to this. The mountains, the rivers, and everything else in this world, as well as the processes of dying and being reborn and of entering into nirvana, are mere derangements caused by stress, mere distortions, mere flowers in the sky. So all of these things in our entire world, for example, the mountains and rivers of the physical world, or the cycle of birth and death of sentient beings, whether they are impure, defiled phenomena, or the pure, flawless phenomena of nirvana, all of these things in fact are entirely manifestations relying on a deranged habitual tendency. They are all distorted appearances. Therefore, after we have studied the Shurangama Sutra, we know that everything we currently see and hear, all these appearances, are just like flowers in the sky. They appear but lack inherent nature. Why is this so? If we observe this principle with reasoning, it is completely clear. We cannot say because the Buddha said this, it must be so. Actually, it is correct. But just because the Buddha said it is false, we have no choice but to admit it. Actually, there is no need for this. Because, regarding these principles spoken by the Buddha, if you do not believe them, then you can observe them with reasoning yourself. Use your own wisdom to deduce it. If you use your wisdom to deduce it, in the end, even within conventional truth, the essence of truly existent things is not established even conventionally. On this point, every one of us can give rise to certain conviction. Otherwise, some of us might feel, this is just a Buddhist saying. We probably have no choice but to accept it this way, because I am a Buddhist. If I am a Buddhist and if I go against the Buddha's teachings, then I am a bad disciple. So I guess I will just reluctantly accept it. Actually, within the Buddha's teachings there is no need for such disciples. Explaining the Dharma with reasoning is always absolutely correct, especially when we speak of emptiness and luminosity. These principles, when we truly go further in our in-depth listening and contemplation, we will naturally come to know them, especially when it comes to some of the tantric teachings. If we continuously listen to and contemplate their profound principles, and if we continuously listen to and contemplate the Madhyamaka teachings on emptiness, in the end, it should become extremely clear. Therefore, on this point as Buddhists we should be quite proud of ourselves, you could say. No matter how sharp the wisdom I use to observe it, it seems I cannot point out in the end a single unreasonable phenomenon in our Buddhism. This point is very important. At this time Ananda asked, then these confusing manifestations are like the knots. Just like the 6 knots mentioned earlier, these stressful manifestations of our 6 realms, these confusing manifestations, how can they be removed? How is untying the knots like releasing the stress? He said, then what kind of method do we have? Since it is just like these knots, then how do we untie such knots? Or how do we remove such confusing manifestations? What method is there for this? At this time the Buddha with his hand, the thus come one thereupon, picked up the knotted scarf, and having tugged the scarf to its left end, he asked Ananda, is this the way to untie it? Ananda replied, no, world-honored one. At this time wasn't the Buddha holding that thing in his hand just now? He held a scarf tied with 6 knots. Then he tugged this scarf to the left, pulling it to the left. As he pulled it, he asked Ananda, in this way can these knots be untied? At this time Ananda, being a wise person, realized that it was not possible. If you pull to the left, the knots might get tighter and tighter. If you just pull it to the left like this, when you pull, these knots are already tied. If you forcefully pull to the left again like this, then maybe these knots will become more and more. They might become tighter and tighter, and impossible to untie. Then, having tugged at the other end of the scarf, the Buddha again asked Ananda, is that the way to untie it? Ananda again replied, no, world-honored one. Then the Buddha once again forcefully pulled the knots from before with his right hand. While tugging it to the right, he asked Ananda again, "By doing this, can these knots be untied?" Ananda is also a wise person. He said it's impossible, it won't work, because the knots will probably get tighter and tighter. It's impossible, it won't work. The Buddha told Ananda, "I have now tugged on both ends of the scarf, but I was not able to untie the knots that way." The Buddha told Ananda, "In that case now I just use my left hand to pull it, and then use my right hand to tug it, pulling forcefully with both hands to the left and right like this. In the end, none of the knots in it can be untied." Ananda also acknowledged this. "In that case, Ananda, do you have a method? How would you untie them? Do you have a method, an expedient method to completely untie the 6 knots that were tied just now? Is there such a method?" Ananda said respectfully to the Buddha, "World-honored one, you must pull on the scarf from within each knot, then they will come undone." Ananda said, "This is very simple. I do have a way." What is the way? We don't keep pulling to the right, nor do we pull to the left. We just take each knot, its own center, and use our hands to loosen it and untie it. This is probably the best method. That was his method at the time. We are probably quite clear about this as well. Of course, when it was mentioned earlier about pulling to the right and left, actually the left side represents worldly people, worldly people's attachment to existence. If we feel that all phenomena truly exist, it's equivalent to pulling to the left. There's no way out. Then, pulling to the right represents the followers of the 2 vehicles. It represents their attachment to emptiness. In that case, whether it is attachment to emptiness or attachment to existence, in reality, other than continuously drowning in samsara, there is no way to attain liberation. Of course, some also say that this represents eternalism and nihilism. Of course, if we just like in the commentary on the ornament of the middle way, as it is explained there, worldly people always believe in existence. Believing in existence is also close to the extreme of eternalism. The followers of the 2 vehicles believing that everything is empty is also close to the extreme of nihilism. Actually, it also falls into the 2 extremes, which can never lead to liberation. Then, next, when Ananda raised this point, the Buddha said to Ananda, "Yes, you are right. If you wish to untie the knot, you pull on the scarf from within each of the knots." The Buddha appeared very pleased. "Yes, it is so. Yes, it is so. What you said is very good. If you truly want to undo this, the knots on that scarf from just now, then you must, just as you said, start working from the center of those knots. Start working from there. In that case, only then will you have a chance to untie such knots." This shows that actually the middle way, the path of Madhyamaka, is not falling into the extreme of existence, nor falling into the extreme of non-existence, and it doesn't fall into the middle either. It doesn't abide in the middle. If everything is a state of non-abiding, this is actually the true nature of all phenomena. Just as it is also said in the Maharatnakuta Sutra, existence is one extreme, non-existence is one extreme. In between existence and non-existence, there is no form, no shape, no illumination, no knowing. This is called the middle way. Existence is one extreme, non-existence is one extreme. Between existence and non-existence, the middle between existence and non-existence, there is also no form, no illumination, no knowing, and so on. This is the middle way. It seems to be roughly this meaning. I didn't memorize the Tibetan perfectly, but it should be okay. You guys wouldn't understand it anyway. There are very few people here who understand Tibetan, so they probably also think, wow, he probably memorized it really well. Therefore, in front of some non-professionals, pretending to use unfamiliar terminology is the best kind of confusing potion. But sometimes my quotes are actually correct. Don't think that whenever I quote in Tibetan, he's starting to do that again. It's not like that either. This is the meaning of the middle way. Ananda, I have explained that the dharmas for becoming a Buddha arise through causes and conditions, but these dharmas are not the coarse attributes that arise from inhering in perceived objects or conjoining to them. Next, the Buddha begins to explain the Madhyamaka path of dependent origination. Just now it was mentioned, through such an analogy it means one cannot fall into the two extremes. Then next, the Buddha, actually when I speak of this Buddha Dharma of mine, it mainly talks about dependent origination and emptiness. The law of dependent origination I teach. Everyone knows we have studied the praise of dependent origination, and we have studied some Madhyamaka and other principles. You all know that what the Buddha taught, the core thought of his main teachings, is primarily dependent origination and emptiness. Many great masters probably also explain it this way. The Buddha is the foremost speaker in the world, meaning that no one else is like the Buddha in explaining dependent origination and emptiness. So the Buddha said, when I speak of the Buddha Dharma, it is mainly generated by speaking of dependent origination and emptiness. And this dependent origination is not accepting the coarse attributes of the worldly combinations. Speaking of the coarse attributes of worldly combinations, they are very simple. Some people think, what is the Buddhist view of dependent origination? It's just that a seed is planted, and then slowly it blossoms and bears fruit. Slowly it becomes a sprout, and then roots, stems, branches, leaves, flowers, fruits, and so on. Such a process, of course this can also be counted as part of dependent origination. But this is based on external objects, a coarse level of dependent origination. Then we say, well, in our world, for example, when we are young, we are infants. Then we have our childhood, then our youth, middle age, then old age, and finally we pass away. This is also a cycle of causes and conditions, and this is also a coarse dependent origination. So the Buddha said, the law of dependent origination that I teach is not blindly speaking of a coarse dependent origination, because this coarse dependent origination is not only in Buddha Dharma. In our world today, anyone who understands a little botany or anthropology, this whole process of change is clear to anyone at a glance. This is not extremely profound, it is not very difficult to understand. Then what is it? What the Buddha said is, my true view of dependent origination is like this. The Thus Come One explains worldly and world-transcending phenomena, and he knows the fundamental causes and the conditions by which these phenomena arise. What the Thus Come One explains, what he proclaims, the dependent origination of world-transcending and worldly phenomena, he actually completely understands their fundamental causes. For example, for us sentient beings, whether it is sentient beings or the physical world, our true original Tathagata Garbha, through what kind of causes and conditions does it then slowly manifest into what kind of impure world? And finally, if we recognize our true nature, what kind of fruition will we attain, and so on? It is extremely profound and wondrous, a kind of profound, subtle cause and condition. This is the Thus Come One's true view of dependent origination. It's not just a very simple arising from causes and conditions that can be called the view of dependent origination taught by the Buddha, otherwise it would all be very simple. Currently, basically, a botanist also knows, oh, this is it. For example, this seed next year, those farmers who have never studied any philosophical schools, they also know that if they plant highland barley this year, they will harvest crops next year. They know this too. Some nomads, after letting the animals mate in the autumn, know that they will give birth next year, they will breed. They all know this concept. Such a relationship of causes and conditions is not, we worldly people also often say, plant melons and you get melons, plant beans and you get beans. Haven't I talked about this before? We had a dialectical materialism teacher. Our relationship wasn't very good. Every time during class he would stare at me. Plant melons and you get melons. Plant beans and you get beans. Such a view is not like what some of our people say out of superstitious thinking. He stared at me, because sometimes he never acknowledged that good is rewarded with good and evil with evil. So he would keep staring at me, talking, and then many classmates would also look over at us. Some people are neither here nor there. If we want to cultivate students, we must start with their thinking first. Indeed, we have some principles that are still very profound and wondrous, very deep. We must definitely understand this principle. Next, the Buddha explained regarding this external wisdom of his, to the point that he knows how many drops of rain are falling in a world that lies beyond, as many other worlds as there are sand grains in the river Ganges, and near at hand. He understands the fundamental reasons for every sort of phenomenon, why pines are straight, why brambles bend, why geese are white, why crows are black. The Buddha is what is called omniscient. How is he omniscient? Even in places beyond as many worlds as grains of sand in the Ganges, if rain falls, he completely knows the exact number of these raindrops. He understands all of this completely. Also, regarding some of our current manifestations, for example, pine trees are straight, bramble bushes are bent, swans are white, crows are black, and so on, the sources of their causes and conditions, he also completely understands this. We also have this in the extensive biography of the Buddha. At that time there was a sage named Bright. There was also another sage named Blue. As for these two sages, that sage Bright had a very dense forest. He counted the branches and leaves for 12 years. Later, sage Blue saw it at a glance and immediately knew it all clearly. They had a competition. Later, these two were actually the later Shariputra and Shakyamuni Buddha. It is also told this way. So we don't know the manifestation of pine trees or water drops and so on. For us this is something that is not very clear. But we do know that sentient beings experience good for good and evil for evil. Such causes and conditions are known only to the Buddha, or that all phenomena are empty in nature, and the luminous nature of mind, the Tathagata Garbha, is possessed by every sentient being. Principles like these, we also know them when we reason through our conceptual mind. Of course, some non-Buddhists, they might also know why crows are black and why swans are white. They probably know this too. Actually, regarding black and white, it might also relate to our perhaps in real life liking black or liking white. There might be some underlying causes and conditions. For some, for example, generally speaking, crows and swans also symbolize evil and good. I sometimes wonder, why are doctors' clothes white? Why are the clothes of some other people black? Because, for example, doctors, perhaps it represents a good deed. I recently saw that in France, more than 140,000 people started protesting. Many police officers in black clothes started beating them. Sometimes I don't know what these clothes symbolize, I'm not entirely clear either. But regardless the reason why crows are black, the Buddha knows this cause and condition. The reason why swans are white, he also knows this cause and condition. It's just that in some sutras these things are all quite pointless. So the most important thing is for sentient beings to attain liberation from suffering. This is very important. Therefore, the Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths, and then taught the truth of all phenomena. The reason is exactly this. Therefore, Ananda, carefully choose one faculty of perception from among the six. If you untie the knot of that faculty, its objects will disappear by themselves. All delusion will melt away. How can what remains not be what is real? He says here, so Ananda, for you should prepare yourself mentally. You must choose from the six faculties. After choosing the six faculties, you need to find one perfectly penetrating faculty among them. Because later on we will continuously explain how each sage, in the past, through which faculty, which object, and which consciousness they attained realization. This will be explained. So the Buddha also tells Ananda, because regarding the 25 realized beings mentioned later, actually, Ananda has not yet reached their level. He doesn't have the qualifications yet, because the ones below are all arhats and bodhisattvas. So Ananda, you should also prepare for the future to choose one among the 6 faculties. If the knots of these faculties are completely removed, then the external sensory objects will naturally perish. If the external sensory objects perish, then the physical world and sentient world we mentioned earlier, all the false appearances will be completely gone. Once all false appearances are gone, then what is called true will also naturally cease to exist. At that time it is truly realizing the highest state. Then next, an analogy is used to explain this sequence, how to untie such knots. Ananda, I now ask you, can we untie the 6 knots in this cotton scarf all at the same time? I now ask you, right now we have that cotton scarf given to him by the heaven free from strife at that time. Well, this cotton scarf, this scarf given to him by the heaven free from strife, we tied 6 knots in it. In that case, if they are untied all at the same time, if the 6 knots are untied all at the same time, then can all these knots be completely untied? This was the question asked of him. Then Ananda said, no, world-honored one. No, world-honored one. It means these knots were tied in sequence in the first place, so now they must be untied in sequence. Though the 6 knots are all in the same scarf, they were not tied all at the same time. Therefore, in freeing them, they cannot be untied all at the same time. What was Ananda's answer? Because regarding this knot, originally when you tied them one by one in sequence. When you tied the knots, it wasn't all at the same time. Nowadays some Qigong masters just go whoosh and blow on it, and immediately there are many knots on it. But perhaps the Buddha didn't do it like that, he tied them one by one. In that case, when you tied them, you also tied them in sequence. Then today, if you want to untie them, you also have to untie them one by one. It is not possible that all at the same time they are all immediately untied. Although the essence of these knots is of one entity, but from the perspective of the knots themselves, they are all different. So since tying them was not at the same time, then untying them cannot be at the same time either. How could untying them be at the same time? It must be that when you tied them, if you had to tie them in sequence, then finally when untying them they are also untied one by one. This is a rule. You cannot stealthily substitute the concept. You cannot stealthily substitute the logic. Then the Buddha said, the same may be said of freeing the knots of the 6 faculties. Then regarding freeing the 6 faculties, actually it is also like this. It means, if they cannot be untied all at the same time, then when we fully realize the 6 faculties, it is also sequential. This is primarily for perhaps the majority of people, especially for someone like Ananda. They probably have to proceed sequentially. Perhaps for those with tantric capacities, in this case, all at the same time. Realizing one means realizing all clearly realized simultaneously. There should be cases like this. In the first stage of freeing a faculty, one understands that the self is empty. Once that emptiness is fully understood, one can become free of attachment to phenomena. So what is the sequence here? Actually, for this faculty, regarding the 6 faculties we mentioned, among the 6 faculties, first one should choose one faculty, and then the first faculty is slowly untied and realized. After this sequence is logical. First, the emptiness of the self of persons should be taught. Then the selflessness of persons attains emptiness. After the emptiness of the self of persons is realized, then this emptiness becomes perfect and clear. After this is accomplished, then one becomes free of attachment to phenomena. Then this attachment to phenomena slowly begins to be liberated. Generally speaking, first for Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, first the selflessness of persons is taught. Then after the selflessness of persons is fully understood, by analogy, the selflessness of phenomena can also be slowly realized by them. So we say that in the Hinayana, the selflessness of persons is already realized, and the selflessness of phenomena is partially realized. It is impossible for them to have realized the selflessness of all phenomena, so it must proceed sequentially. In this way, then, the selflessness of phenomena must be accomplished, liberating from the attachment to phenomena. After being liberated from the attachment to phenomena, then both are empty and no longer arise. If both person and phenomena are empty, at this time emptiness also cannot arise. This is called the patience that the bodhisattva develops by means of samadhi. This name is a bodhisattva who attains the patience of non-arising from samadhi. The latter part describes his state, a bodhisattva who attains the patience of the non-arising of phenomena, relying on samadhi. It can be explained this way, because first the selflessness of persons is fully understood, and later the selflessness of phenomena. Actually, for the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena, perhaps for some with sharp faculties, they are also realized at the same time. It's not that such opportunities don't exist. So at this time next it explains, Ananda and the others in the great assembly, having received this instruction from the Buddha, gained such wisdom and such a thorough and complete understanding that they now had no doubts. At this time, when Ananda and the great assembly heard, having received the Buddha's great compassionate, such supreme instruction, Ananda and the great assembly, their wisdom and awareness became perfectly penetrating and understood. They basically fully understood the issues regarding the 6 faculties mentioned above, having understood them all without any doubts. Today Ananda is doing all right, but his problems might surface again. Ananda placed his palms together and bowed to the ground before the Buddha, and then said, "Today our bodies and minds have been filled with light, and we are delighted that our understanding is unimpeded." At this time everyone was very happy. At the same time everyone placed their palms together and bowed at the Buddha's feet. Then they respectfully told the Buddha, speaking like this, "All of us present here today, having truly received the Buddha's instruction, our bodies and minds have completely become pure, clear, flawless, and delighted without any hindrances or obstacles." At that time, indeed, actually for us, not just the Buddha, if some Dharma masters truly explain some Mahayana Dharma to you, some people because of one class or one book or one teaching, many doubts in your mind stream are also completely resolved. Then the afflictions in one's own mind stream can be resolved through this. Some people, after listening to the Dharma, their mind stream transforms very quickly. Previously their afflictions were especially severe, their mind stream was impure, they were often a person in intense suffering. Because later, as they listened to the Dharma more and more, their mind resonated with the Dharma. After resonating slowly, the Dharma integrated into their own mind stream. Finally, indeed, their conduct accords with the Dharma, their view also accords with the Dharma. They themselves are also able to benefit many sentient beings. So for our mind to enter the Dharma, this is very important. Therefore, in Omniscient Longchenpa's The Precious Garland of the Four Themes, it specifically discusses, may the mind enter the Dharma, may the Dharma enter the path. And finally, the path transforms our impure consciousness into wisdom. Such a concept is also very important. Look here, generally speaking, their previous anxiety or doubt, these are all gone. Then next, Ananda also might have some. However, although we have now understood the meaning of when the 6 are untied, the one will vanish, we do not yet know which one of the sense faculties can lead us to break through to enlightenment. Although he had already understood the meaning of when the 6 are untied mentioned earlier, as for the 6 faculties that they are liberated sequentially, this principle has already been understood. But what he hasn't understood yet is the most important perfectly penetrating faculty, the principle of the perfectly penetrating faculty. Now Ananda's questions come one after another. Now regarding the perfectly penetrating faculty, he doesn't quite understand it. World-honored one, I have drifted from age to age, homeless and alone. How could I have known, how could I have imagined that I would meet the Buddha as a member of his family? Then he said, World-honored one, we sentient beings have drifted in this sea of suffering since beginningless time. Drifting in this sea of suffering. For many lifetimes and countless eons, without support, without a protector, all alone, experiencing suffering out in the open wilderness, in the wilderness of samsara. How could I have known, how could I have dared to imagine, I truly never thought that today with the Buddha there could be such a, you could say, family joy, or to be with the Buddha. Some say it's because he is a relative of the Buddha, to become a relative of his, and to rely on the Buddha, his own master, from beginningless time. Turning to this, how could I have imagined today, having such a long dialogue with the Buddha, such a good opportunity? Even in a dream it was unimaginable. Today I am especially happy. I am like an infant who has suddenly been reunited with its beloved mother. It is equivalent to a stray child who has lost its mother's milk, suddenly reuniting with its compassionate mother. Very excellent. This is probably his meaning. I have met the Buddha and have had the opportunity to become fully enlightened, and I have been given a hidden teaching. But if my basic mode of understanding nevertheless remains the same, then I might as well never have heard the Buddha's teaching at all. There is a slightly different explanation for this. It means if we again in this way, already having gathered or having met to attain the path in such a good opportunity, the thus come one is always with us. In such a Dharma assembly, when there is such a good opportunity, the secret teachings that have been received, the secret instructions obtained, remains the same, means it is just like before, still remaining at the level of understanding. It literally, if it's just understood at the original literal level, then this means it's no different from not having heard these teachings. There is no difference. This is one way to explain it. It means today we have such a good opportunity, and we have received from the Thus Come One these supreme secret words. If for these secret words we just leave them at the literal level without properly verifying them and practicing them, always treating them just as language, if we view them this way, then actually they don't have much value. Actually it's exactly the same as not having heard the Thus Come One's secret words and teachings. If one's own mind stream remains the same as before, so stubborn and difficult to tame, so it is meaningless. Some explain it this way. Others say relying on such an opportunity to attain the path actually means that these secret words spoken, the secret words, should become the originally possessed cause of one's own enlightenment. The meaning is the teachings received today, these especially secret and profound teachings, should become just like one's originally possessed, just like the principles one originally possesses, a cause and condition to reawaken, to become enlightened anew. If it's not like this, otherwise, it's as if hearing the teachings is almost the same as not hearing them. It is meaningless. The Tibetan is also explained according to this latter view. I see that many past great masters differ slightly in their explanation of the phrases, but the general meaning should be the same. When we have such a good opportunity, we should be able to put these teachings to use. We must understand the meaning of the words. At the same time, we ourselves should actually practice them. If we do not do this, it seems that just hearing these teachings is almost the same as not hearing them. We also often say, after we hear them, we should practice them well. If we do not practice them well, if we do not cut off the afflictions in our own mind stream, then other than planting a virtuous root, they haven't served their most fundamental purpose. So this passage is also very important in the Shurangama Sutra. It lets later practitioners, when they encounter these teachings, have a mind that appreciates their rarity. They should have a cherishing mind, and then carefully collect them in, for example, one's own notebook. If one has sharp faculties, record them all in one's own mind, so they can be put to use any time, anywhere. It means this is needed. I only hope that he will be greatly compassionate towards us, and will out of kindness bestow upon us a secret and awe-inspiring Dharma that will be the Thus Come One's ultimate instruction. At that time Ananda said, I supplicate the great compassionate Buddha, you should compassionately bestow upon me the secret and awe-inspiring method, the Dharma of the Thus Come One. to accomplish the thus come one's final. The final is the most ultimate, the profoundest instruction. Here he requests the thus come one, you must give us an instruction. Of course, regarding this instruction, his meaning is not necessarily that it must be spoken by the Buddha, because below there are still many disciples who will speak. So regarding Ananda's attitude, it is not that you, the thus come one, must definitely speak. Having spoken these words, he bowed to the ground. After Ananda finished saying this, he again prostrated fully to the ground. He withdrew into the hidden recesses of his mind, hoping that he would receive from the Buddha a secret and private transmission. Regarding withdrawing into the hidden recesses, there are also some different commentaries from the great masters. In the Tibetan, that latter part is basically not mentioned, prostrating fully to the ground, and then he retreated to the other side of the thus come one, and then just kept waiting there to receive the later teachings. The Tibetan is basically like this, but the meaning in the Chinese, withdrawing into the hidden recesses, actually withdrawing refers to stepping back. Then hidden means physically and verbally not revealing, a more concealed manner. His outward expression is not obvious. Then regarding the hidden recesses, he was waiting for this secret teaching, or he was constantly waiting for such a teaching. Then regarding hoping for a secret transmission from the Buddha, actually he was hoping to receive from the thus come one, indirectly given to them, a kind of special teaching, because below it will become clearer, just like what we call the mind transmission of the thus come one. Many teachings were not directly transmitted by the thus come one, but when transmitted by these other realized beings, actually he also attains a certain benefit. So this attitude of Ananda's, he himself outwardly did not particularly explicitly say, thus come one, you must explain to us principles regarding such and such. He didn't say that. He said, you must give us an instruction that is secret, awe-inspiring, and most ultimate. After finishing speaking, his own expression was a bit different than before, slightly more not revealing it outwardly, and he was always waiting for a secret teaching to directly receive it. He had such an attitude. Most of the commentaries, although the methods of interpreting the words are different, but basically he kept waiting in this manner. So at this time, then the world-honored one said to the assembly of great bodhisattvas and great arhats, who were free of outflows, at this time the Buddha told those in the great assembly, because the great assembly consists of humans, non-humans, ordinary beings, there are all kinds of beings, including non-Buddhists, all kinds of beings. At this time he told those great bodhisattvas, he told all those whose afflictions were already exhausted, the great arhats. At this time he called out these outstanding ones. He didn't just casually call upon ordinary beings. I now ask all of you bodhisattvas and arhats, having made a resolve to become enlightened, he said, you bodhisattvas and you arhats, all of you within my teachings, have attained the state of no more learning. I now ask all of you bodhisattvas and arhats, having made a resolve to become enlightened, which one of the 18 constituent elements did you make use of in order to break through to enlightenment? By what expedient did you enter samadhi? Then the Buddha said, today I'm going to start testing you, I'm going to start asking you, because below there are 25 disciples. What they will mainly talk about are the 18 constituent elements and the 7 primary elements. Regarding the 18 constituent elements, each has one who realized it. Regarding the 7 primary elements, each also has one who realized it. Actually, the ear faculty is placed at the end, but actually it should be all of them. The 18 constituent elements and the 7 primary elements representing each person, how they attained realization during the causal stage. So the Buddha also didn't ask, in the fruition stage, what is your state like? He didn't ask it like that. Originally, at the very beginning, when you attained realization, which of the 18 constituent elements did you rely on to attain perfect penetration, to become perfectly penetrating? Then through what expedient means did you enter into samadhi? He asked this. So below it will explain the states of the 25 disciples, each individual state. This should be something very famous in the Shurangama Sutra. Let's see if here in our place as well, whether a 26th disciple will attain enlightenment. In that case, in our next class we will discuss what follows. Logically speaking, it should be relatively simple. This is the Shurangama Sutra.
Bandara Badma Sadar Bandara Badma Sadar Bandara Badma Sadar